Hey guys, this is Offmo J9, Gnome Jar with removable lid. I use a pint-sized jar because I want to store things in it. I made a hat template, but you may have to alter it depending on the size of your jar. I cut my templates out of felt. For the hat, I used felt in the color antique white. Sew or glue the inner hat piece to form a cone. Next, stuff it with polyfiber fill. Then sew it closed with a circle piece. Sew or glue the outer piece of the hat to form a bigger cone. Then place the inner hat piece inside the outer hat piece. To make the beard, I didn't have faux fur, so I used what I already had, which was this white cotton yarn. I cut 2 long pieces of yarn. Then I cut shorter pieces and attach them to the longer pieces of yarn using a lark's head knot. To do this, align the ends to find the center, place it over the 2 longer pieces of yarn, and pull the ends through the loop created. Then pull it tight. I made 8 lark's head knots. Then I separated the 2 longer pieces of yarn. For the top piece, I added a bead to make a nose. For the bottom piece, continue making lark's head knots until you reach the other end of the bead. I made 6 lark's head knots. Combine the 2 longer pieces of yarn and make 8 lark's head knots. Then comb out the strands. I made another one without the bead, and this had 14 lark's head knots. I use the back side of the knots. Part the middle for the nose. Join the 2 pieces by making a couple lark's head knots on both ends. I braided the ends. Next, hot glue the beard onto the hat. Then cut the extra yarn. Glue the hat onto the lid. I added a tiny heart to the hat. Next, trim the beard. I cut a rectangle out of felt to wrap around the jar. Then I sewed the sides together. I made a circle that's the same size as the bottom of the jar. Then I sewed them together. I may have added too much glue to the hat, which formed a faint line around it, so I covered it with this pom-pom trim. Add something in the jar like treats or pine cones. You could leave the gnome without a cover to make the treats or whatever's inside visible. And here's how the gnome jar turned out.